What then is the fruit of these opinions? It is that which ought to be the most noble and the most becoming to those who are really educated. Release from perturbation, release from fear, freedom. For in these matters we must not believe the many, who say that free persons only ought to be educated, but we should rather believe the philosophers, who say that the educated only are free. How is this? In this manner, is freedom anything else than the power of living as we choose? Nothing else. Tell me then, ye men, do you wish to live in error? We do not. No one then who lives in error is free. Do you wish to live in fear? Do you wish to live in sorrow? Do you wish to live in perturbation? By no means. No one then who is in a state of fear or sorrow or perturbation is free. But whoever is delivered from sorrows and fears and perturbations, he is at the same time also delivered from servitude. How then can we continue to believe you, most of your legislators, when you say, we only allow free persons to be educated? For philosophers say we allow none to be free except the educated. That is, God does not allow it. When then a man is turned around before the praetor of his own slave, has he done nothing? He has done something. What? He has turned round his own slave before the praetor. Has he done nothing more? Yes. He is also bound to pay for him the tax called the 20th. Well then, is not the man who has gone through this ceremony become free? No more than he has become free from perturbations. Have you who are able to turn around others no master? Is not money your master, or a girl, or boy, or some tyrant, or some friend of the tyrant? Why do you trouble when you are going off to any trial of this kind? It is for this reason that I often say, study and hold in readiness these principles, by which you may determine what those things are, with reference to which you ought to be cautious, courageous in that which does not depend on your will, cautious in which that does depend on it. Of tranquility. Consider you who are going into court, what you wish to maintain, and what you wish to succeed in. For if you wish to maintain a will conformable to nature, you have every security, every facility, you have no troubles. For if you wish to maintain what is in your power, and it is naturally free, and if you are content with these things, what else do you care for? For who is the master of such things? Who can take them away? If you choose to be modest and faithful, who shall not allow you to be so? If you choose not to be restrained or compelled, who shall compel you to desire what you think that you ought not to desire? Who shall compel you to avoid what you do not think fit to avoid? But what do you say? The judge will determine against you something that appears formidable, but that you should also suffer in trying to avoid it. How can he do that? When then the pursuit of objects and the avoiding of them are in your power, what else do you care for? Let this be your preface, this your narrative, this your confirmation, this your victory, this your peroration, this your applause. Therefore Socrates said to one who was reminding him to prepare for his trial, do you not think then that I have been preparing for it all my life? By what kind of preparation? I have maintained that which was in my own power. How then? I have never done anything unjust, either in my private or in my public life. But if you wish to maintain externals also, your poor body, your little property, and your little estimation, I advise you to make from this moment all possible preparation, and then consider both the nature of your judge and your adversary. If it is necessary to embrace his knees, embrace his knees. If to weep, weep. If to groan, groan. For when you have subjected to externals what is your own, then be a slave and do not resist, and do not sometimes choose to be a slave, and sometimes not choose, but with all your mind be one or the other, either free or a slave, either instructed or uninstructed, either a well-bred cock or a mean one, either endure to be beaten until you die, or yield at once. And let it not happen to you to receive many stripes and then to yield. But if these things are base, determine immediately, where is the nature of evil and good? It is where truth is and where nature is. There is caution. Where truth is, there is courage. Where nature is. For this reason, also, it is ridiculous to say, suggest something to me. What should I suggest to you? Well, form my mind so as to accommodate itself to any event. Why, that is just the same as if a man who is ignorant of letters should say, tell me what to write, when any name is proposed to me. For if I should tell him to write Dion, and then another should come and propose to him not the name of Dion, but that of Theon, what will be done? What will he write? But if you practice writing, you are also prepared to write anything that is required. If you are not, what can I now suggest? For if circumstances require something else, what will you say, or what will you do? Remember then this general precept, and you will need no suggestion. But if you gape after externals, you must of necessity ramble up and down in obedience to the will of your master. And who is the master? He who has the power over the things which you seek to gain or try to avoid. how magnanimity is consistent with care. Things themselves are indifferent, but the use of them is not indifferent. How then shall a man preserve firmness and tranquillity, and at the same time be careful and neither rash nor negligent? If he imitates those who play at dice, the counters are indifferent, the dice are indifferent. How do I know what the cast will be? But to use carefully and dexterously the cast of the dice, this is my business. Thus then in life also the chief business is this: distinguish and separate things and say, externals are not in my power, will is in my power. Where shall I seek the good and the bad? Within, in the things which are my own. But in what does not belong to you, call nothing either good or bad, or profit or damage, or anything of the kind. What then? Should we use such things carelessly? In no way. For this, on the other hand, is bad for the faculty of the will, and consequently against nature. But we should act carefully, because the use is not indifferent, and we should also act with firmness and freedom from perturbations, because the material is indifferent. For where the material is not indifferent, there no man can hinder me or compel me. Where I can be hindered and compelled, the obtaining of those things is not in my power, nor is it good or bad. But the use is either bad or good, and the use is in my power. But it is difficult to mingle and to bring together these two things, the carefulness of him who is affected by the matter, and the firmness of him who has no regard for it. But it is not impossible, and if it is, happiness is impossible. But we should act as we do in the case of a voyage. What can I do? I can choose the master of the ship, the sailors, the day, the opportunity. Then comes a storm. What more have I to care for my part is done. The business belongs to another, the master. But the ship is sinking. What then have I to do? I do the only thing that I can, not to be drowned full of fear, nor screaming nor blaming God, but knowing that what has been produced must also perish. For I am not an immortal being, but a man, as part of the whole, as an hour is part of the day. I must be present like the hour, and pass like the hour. What difference then does it make to me how I pass away, whether by being suffocated or by a fever? For I must pass through some such means. How then is it said that some external things are according to nature and others contrary to nature? It is said, as it might be said if we were separated from union. For to the foot I shall say that it is according to nature for it to be clean. But if you take it as a foot and as a thing not detached, it will be fit to both. It will befit it both to step into the mud and tread on thorns, and sometimes to be cut off for the good of the whole body. Otherwise it is no longer a foot. We should think in some such way about ourselves also. What are you? A man. If you consider yourself as detached from other men, it is according to nature to live to old age, to be rich, to be healthy. But if you consider yourself as a man and a part of a certain whole, it is for the sake of that whole, that at one time you should be sick, at another time take a voyage and run into danger, and at another time be in want, and in some cases die prematurely. Why then are you troubled? Do you not know that as a foot is no longer a foot if it is detached from the body? So you are no longer a man if you are separated from other men? For what is a man? A part of a state, of that first, which consists of gods and of men, then of that which is called next to it, which is a small image of the universal state. What then must I be brought to trial? Must another have a fever, another sail on the sea, another die, and another be condemned? Yes, for it is impossible in such a universe of things, among so many living together, that such things should not happen, some to one and others to other. It is your duty, then, since you are to come here, to say what you ought, to arrange these things as it is fit. Then someone says, I shall charge you with doing me wrong. Much good may it do you, I have done my part, but whether you also have done yours, you must look to that, for there is some danger of this too, that it may escape your notice. Of indifference. The hypothetical proposition is indifferent. The judgment about it is not indifferent, but it is either knowledge or opinion or error. Thus life is indifferent. The use is not indifferent. When any man then tells you that these things also are indifferent, do not become negligent. And when a man invites you to be careful, do not become abject and struck with admiration of material things. And it is good for you to know your own preparation and power, that in those matters where you have not been prepared, you may keep quiet and not be vexed. If others have the advantage over you, for you too in syllogisms will claim to have the advantage over them, and if others should be vexed at this, you will console them by saying, I have learned them, and you have not. Thus also where there is need of any practice, seek not that which is acquired from the need, but yield in that matter to those who have had practice, and be yourself content with firmness of mind. Go and salute a certain person. How? Not meanly. But I have been shut out, for I have not learned to make my way through the window. And when I have found the door shut, I must either come back or enter through the window. But still speak to him. In what way? Not meanly. But suppose that you have not got what you wanted. Was this your business, and not his? Why then do you claim that which belongs to another? Always remember what is your own and what belongs to another, and you will not be disturbed. Chrysippus therefore said, well, so long as future things are uncertain, I always cling to those which are more adapted to the conservation of that which is according to nature. For God himself has given me the faculty of such choice. But if I knew that it was fated for me to be sick, I would even move towards it, for the foot also, if it had intelligence, would move to go into the mud. For why are ears of corn produced? Is it not that they may become dry? And do they not become dry that they may be reaped? For they are not separated from communion with other things. If then they had perception, ought they wish to never be reaped? But this is a curse upon ears of corns to be never reaped. So we must know that in the case of men too, it is a curse not to die. Just the same as not to be ripened and not to be reaped. But since we must be reaped, we also know that we are reaped, we are vexed at it. For we neither know what we are, nor have we studied what belongs to man, as those who have studied horses know what belongs to horses. But Chrysantas, when he was going to strike the enemy, checked himself, when he heard the trumpet sounding a retreat. So it seemed better to him to obey the general's command than to follow his own inclination. But not one of us chooses, even when necessity summons, readily to obey it, but weeping and groaning we suffer what we do suffer, and call them circumstances. What kind of circumstances, man? If you give the name of circumstances to the things which are around you, all things are circumstances. But if you call hardships by this name, what hardship is there in the dying of that which has been produced? But that which destroys is neither a sword or a wheel or the sea or a tile or a tyrant. Why do you care about the way of going down to Hades? All ways are equal. But if you will listen to the truth, the way in which the tyrant sends you is shorter. A tyrant never killed a man in 6 months, but a fever is often a year about it. All these things are only the sound and the noise of empty names. How we ought to use divination. Through an unreasonable regard to divination, many of us omit many duties. For what more can the diviner see than death or danger or disease, or generally things of that kind? If then I must expose myself to danger for a friend, and if it is my duty even to die for him, what need have I then for divination? Have I not within me a diviner who has told me the nature of good and evil, and has explained to me the signs of both? What need have I then to consult the viscera of victims, or the flight of birds? And why do I submit when he says, it is for your interest? For does he know what is for my interest? Does he know what is good? And as he has learned the signs of the viscera, has he also learned the signs of good and evil? For if he knows the signs of these, he knows the signs of both the beautiful and of the ugly, and of the just and the unjust. Do you tell me, man, what is the thing which is signified for me? Is it life or death, poverty or wealth? But whether these things are for my interest or whether they are not, I do not intend to ask you. Why don't you give your opinion on matters of grammar? And why do you give it here about things on which we are all in error and disputing within one another?
What then leads us to frequent use of divination? Cowardice, the dread of what will happen. This is the reason why we flatter the diviners. Pray, master, shall I succeed to the property of my father? Let us see. Let us sacrifice on the occasion. Yes, master, as fortune chooses. When he has said, you shall succeed to the inheritance, we think him as if we received the inheritance from him. The consequence is that they play upon us.
Will you not, then, seek the nature of good in the relational animal? For if it is not there, you will not choose to say that it exists in any other thing. What then, are not plants and animals also the works of God? They are, but they are not superior things, nor yet parts of the gods. But you are a superior thing. You are a portion separated from the deity. You have in yourself a certain portion of him. Why then are you ignorant of your own noble descent? Why do you not know whence you came? Will you not remember when you are eating who you are, who eat, and whom you feed? When you are in social intercourse, when you are exercising yourself, when you are engaged in discussion, know you not that you are nourishing a god, that you are exercising a god? Wretch, you are carrying about a god with you, and you know it not. Do you think that I mean some god of silver, of gold, and external? You carry him within yourself, and you perceive not that you are polluting him by impure thoughts and dirty deeds. And if an image of God were present, you would not dare to do any of the things which you are doing. But when God himself is present within and sees all and hears all, you are not ashamed of thinking such things and doing such things, ignorant as you are of your own nature and subject to the anger of God. Then why do we fear when we are sending a young man from the school into active life, lest he should do anything improperly, eat improperly, have improper intercourse with women, lest the rags in which he is wrapped should dispace him, lest fine garments should make him proud? This youth, does not know his own God. He knows not with whom he sets out. But can we endure when he says, I wish I had you with me? Have you not God with you? And do you seek for any other when you have him? Or will God tell you anything else than this? If you were a statue of Phidias, either Athena or Zeus, you would think both of yourself and of the artist. And if you had any understanding, you would try to do nothing unworthy of him who made you of yourself, and try not to appear in an unbecoming dress to those who look upon you. But now, because Zeus has made you, for this reason do you care not how you shall appear? And yet is the artist like the artist in the other, or the work in the one case like the other? And what work of an artist, for instance, has in itself the faculties which the artist shows in making it? Is not marble or bronze or gold or ivory? And the Athena of Phidias, when she has once extended the hand and received in it the figure of victory, stands in that attitude forever? But the works of God have power of motion. They breathe. They have the faculty of using the appearances of things and the power of examining them. Being the work of such an artist, you dishonor him? And what shall I say? Not only that he made you, but also entrusted you to yourself, and made you a deposit to yourself. Will you not think of this too? But do you also dishonor your guardianship? But if God had entrusted an orphan to you, would you thus neglect him? He has delivered yourself to your own care, and says, I had no one fitter to entrust him to than yourself. Keep him for me such as he is by nature modest, faithful, erect, unterrified, free from passion and perturbation. And then you do not keep him such. But some will say, whence has this fellow got the arrogance which he displays, and the supercilious looks? I have not yet so much gravity as befits a philosopher, for I do not yet feel confidence in what I have learned, and what I have assented to. I still fear my own weakness. Let me get confidence, then you shall see a countenance such as I ought to have, and an attitude such as I ought to have. Then I will show to you the statue. When it is perfected, when it is polished, what do you expect? A supercilious countenance? Does the Zeus at Olympia lift up his brow? No, his look is fixed, as becomes him who is ready to say, irrevocable is my word, and shall not fail. Iliad. Such will I show myself to you, faithful, modest, noble, free from perturbation. What, and immortal too? Except from old age and from sickness. No, but dying as becomes a god, sickening as becomes a god. This power I possess, this I can do, but the rest I do not possess, nor can I do. I will show the nerves of a philosopher. What nerves are these? A desire never disappointed, an aversion which never falls, and that which it would avoid, a proper pursuit, a diligent purpose, an assent which is not rash. These you shall see. That when we cannot fulfill that which the character of a man promises, we assume the character of a philosopher. It is no common thing to do this only, to fulfill the promise of a man's nature. For what is a man? The answer is, a rational and moral being. Then by the rational faculty, from whom are we separated? From wild beasts. And from what others? From sheep and like animals. Take care then to do nothing like a wild beast, but if you do, you have lost the character of a man. You have not fulfilled your promise. See that you do nothing like a sheep, but if you do, in this case also the man is lost. What then do we do as sheep? When we act gluttonously, when we act lewdly, when we act rashly, filthily, inconsiderately. To what have we declined? To sheep. What have we lost? The rational faculty. When we act contentiously and harmfully and passionately and violently, to what have we declined? To wild beasts. Consequently, some of us are great wild beasts, and others little beasts, of a bad disposition and small. Whence we may say, let me be eaten by a lion. But in all these ways, the promise of a man acting as a man is destroyed. For when is a conjunctive proposition maintained? When it fulfills what its nature promises, so that the preservation of a complex proposition is when it is a conjunction of truths. When is a disjunctive maintained? When it fulfills what it promises. When are flutes, a lyre, a horse, a god preserved? What is the wonder, then, if man also in like manner is preserved, and in like manner is lost? Each man is improved and preserved by corresponding acts. The carpenter by acts of carpentry, the grammarian by acts of grammar. But if a man accustoms himself to write ungrammatically, of necessity his art will be corrupted and destroyed. Thus modest actions preserve the modest man, and immodest actions destroy him. And actions of fidelity preserve the faithful man, and the contrary actions destroy him. And on the other hand, contrary actions strengthen contrary characters. Shamelessness strengthens the shameless man, faithlessness the faithless man, abusive words the abusive man, anger the man of an angry temper, and unequal receiving and giving make the avaricious man more avaricious. For this reason, philosophers admonish us not to be satisfied with learning only, but also to add study and then practice, for we have long been accustomed to do contrary things, and we put in practice opinions which are contrary to true opinions. If then we shall not also put in practice right opinions, we shall be nothing more than the expositors of the opinions of others. For now, who among us is not able to discourse according to the rules of art about good and evil things? That of things some are good, some are bad, and some are indifferent. The good then are virtues, the things which participate in virtues, and the bad are the contrary, and the indifferent are wealth, health, reputation. Then, if in the midst of our talk there should happen some greater noise than usual, or some of those who are present should laugh at us, we are disturbed. Philosopher, where are the things which you were talking about? Whence did you produce and utter them? From the lips, and thence only. Why then do you corrupt the aids provided by others? Why do you treat the weightiest matters as if you were playing a game of dice? For it is one thing to lay up bread and wine as in a storehouse, and another thing to eat. That which has been eaten is digested, distributed, and has become sinews, flesh, bones, blood, healthy color, healthy breath. Whatever is stored up, when you choose you can readily take and show it, but you have no other advantage from it except so far as to appear to possess it. For what is the difference between explaining these doctrines and those of men who have different opinions? Sit down now and explain, according to the rules of art, the opinions of Epicurus, and perhaps he will explain his opinions in a more useful manner than Epicurus himself. Why then do you call yourself a Stoic? Why do you deceive the many? Why do you act the part of a Jew when you are a Greek? Do you not see how each is called a Jew, or a Syrian, or an Egyptian? And when we see a man inclining to two sides, we are accustomed to say, "This man is not a Jew, but he acts as one." But when he has assumed the effects of one who has been imbued with Jewish doctrine and has adopted that sect, then he is in fact, and he is named a Jew. How we may discover the duties of life from names. Consider you who you are. In the first place, you are a man, and this is one who has nothing superior to the faculty of the will, but all other things subjected to it, and the faculty itself he possesses unslaved and free from subjection. Consider then from what things you have been separated by reason. You have been separated from wild beasts, you have been separated from domestic animals. Further, you are a citizen of the world, and a part of it, not one of the subservient, but one of the principal parts. For you are capable of comprehending the divine administration, and of considering the connection of things. What then does the character of a citizen promise? To hold nothing as profitable to himself, to deliberate about nothing as if he were detached from the community, but to act as the hand or foot would do, if they had reason and understood the constitution of nature, for they would never put themselves in motion, nor desire anything otherwise than with reference to the whole. Therefore the philosophers say well that if the good man had foreknowledge of what would happen, he would cooperate towards his own sickness and death and mutilation, since he knows that these things are assigned to him according to the universal arrangement, that the whole is superior to the part, and the state to the citizen. But now, because we do not know the future, it is our duty to stick to the things which are in their nature more suitable for our choice, for we were made among other things for this. After this, remember that you are a son. What does this character promise? To consider that everything which is in the sons belongs to the Father, to obey him in all things, never to blame him to another, nor to say or do anything which does him injury, to yield to him in all things and give way, cooperating with him as far as you can. After this, know that you are brother also, and that to this character it is due to make concessions, to be easily persuaded, to speak good of your brother, never to claim in opposition to him any of the things which are independent of the will, but readily to give them up, that you may have a larger share in what is dependent on the will. For see what a thing it is in place of a lettuce, if it should so happen, or a seat, to gain for yourself goodness of disposition. How great is the advantage! Next to this, if you are a senator of any state, remember that you are a senator. If a youth, that you are a youth. If an old man, that you are an old man. For each of such names, if it comes to be examined, marks out the proper duties. But if you go and blame your brother, I say to you, you have forgotten who you are and what is your name. In the next place, if you were a smith and made a wrong use of the hammer, you would have forgotten the smith, and if you have forgotten the brother, and instead of a brother have become an enemy, would you appear not to have changed one thing for another in that case? And if instead of a man who is a tame animal and social, you have become a mischievous wild beast, treacherous and biting, have you lost nothing? But you must lose a bit of money that you may suffer damage, and does the loss of nothing else do a man damage? If you had lost the art of grammar or music, would you think the loss of it a damage? And if you shall lose modesty, moderation, and gentleness, do you think the loss nothing? Yet the things first mentioned are lost by some cause, external and independent of the will, and the second by our own fault. And as to the first, neither to have them nor to lose them is shameful, but as to the second, not to have them and to lose them is shameful, and matter of reproach and a misfortune. What then? Shall I not hurt him who has hurt me? In the first place, consider what hurt is, and remember that you have heard from the philosophers. For if the good consists in the will, and the evil also in the will, see if what you say is not this. What then, since that man has hurt himself by doing an unjust act to me, shall I not hurt myself by doing some unjust act to him? Why do we not imagine ourselves something of this kind? But where there is any detriment to the body or to our possession, there is harm there. And where the same thing happens to the faculty of the will, there is no harm. For he who has been deceived, or he who has done an unjust act, neither suffers in the head, nor in the eye, nor in the hip, nor does he lose his estate. And we wish for nothing else than these things. But whether we shall have the will modest and faithful, or shameless and faithless, we care not the least, except only in the school so far as a few words are concerned. Therefore, our proficiency is limited to these few words, but beyond them it does not exist, even in the slightest degree. What the beginning of philosophy is. The beginning of philosophy, to him at least who enters on it in the right way and by the door, is a consciousness of his own weakness and inability about necessary things. For we come into the world with no natural notion of a right-angled triangle, or of a diesis, or of a half-tone. But we learn each of these things by a certain transmission according to art, and for this reason those who do not know them do not think that they know them, but as to good and evil, and beautiful and ugly, and becoming and unbecoming, and happiness and misfortune, and proper and improper, and what we ought to do and what we ought not to do, whoever came into the world without having an innate idea of them. Wherefore we all use these names, and we endeavor to fit the preconceptions to the several cases, thus: he has done well, he has not done well, he has done as he ought, not as he ought. He has been unfortunate, he has been fortunate, he is unjust, he is just. Who does not use these names? Who among us defers the use of them till he has learned them, as he defers the use of the words about lines or sounds? And the cause of this is that we come into the world already taught, as it were by nature, some things on this matter, and proceeding from these we have added to them self-conceit. For why, a man says, do I not know the beautiful and the ugly? Have I not the notion of it? You have. Do I not adapt it to particulars? You do. Do I not then adapt it properly? And that lies the whole question, and conceit is added here. For beginning from these things which are admitted, men proceed to that which is a matter of dispute by means of unsuitable adaptation. For if they possess this power of adaptation in addition to those things, what would hinder them from being perfect? But now, since you think that you properly adapt the preconceptions to the particulars, tell me whence you derive this, because I think so. But it does not seem so to another, and he thinks that he also makes a proper adaptation, or does he not think so? He does think so. Is it possible, then, that both of you can properly apply the preconceptions to things about which you have contrary opinions? It is not possible. Can you then show us anything better towards adapting the preconceptions beyond your thinking that you do? Does the madman do any other things than the things which seem to him right? Is then this criterion sufficient for him also? It is not sufficient. Come, then, to something which is superior to seeming. What is this? Observe, this is the beginning of philosophy, a perception of the disagreement of men with one another, and an inquiry into the cause of the disagreement, and a condemnation and distrust of that which only seems, and a certain investigation of that which seems, whether it seems rightly, and a discovery of some rule, as we have discovered a balance in the determination of weights, and a carpenter's rule, in the case of straight and crooked things. This is the beginning of philosophy. Must we say that all things are right which seem so at all? And how is it possible that contradictions can be right? Not all, then, but all which seem to us to be right. How more do you than those which seem right to the Syrians? Why more than what seems right to the Egyptians? Why more than what seems right to me or to any other man? Not at all more. What then seems to every man is not sufficient for determining what is, for neither in the case of weights nor measures are we satisfied with the bare appearance. But in each case we have discovered a certain rule. In this matter, then, there is no rule superior to what seems. And how is it possible that the most necessary things among men should have no sign, and be incapable of being discovered? There is then some rule, and why then do we not seek the rule and discover it, and afterwards use it without varying from it, not even stretching out the finger without it? For this, I think, is that which, when it is discovered, cures of the madness those who use mere seeming as a measure, and misuse it, so that for the future, proceeding from certain things, known and made clear, we may use in the case of particular things the preconceptions which are distinctly fixed. What is the matter presented to us about which we are inquiring? Pleasure. Subject it to the rule, throw it in the balance. Ought the good to be such a thing that it is fit that we have confidence in it? Yes. And in which we ought to confide? It ought to be. Is it fit to trust anything which is insecure? No. Is then pleasure anything secure? No. Take it then and throw it out of the scale, and drive it far away from the place of good things. But if you are not sharp-sighted, and one balance is not good enough for you, bring another. Is it fit to be elated over what is good? Yes. Is it proper then to be elated over present pleasure? See that you do not say that it is proper, but if you do, I shall then not think you worthy even of the balance. Thus things are tested and weighed when the rules are ready. And to philosophize is this, to examine and confirm the rules, and then to use them when they are known is the act of a wise and good man. Of disputation or discussion. What things a man must learn in order to be able to apply the art of his disputation has been accurately shown by our philosophers, but with respect to the proper use of the things, we are entirely without practice. Only give to any of us whom you please an illiterate man to discuss with, and he cannot discover how to deal with the man. But when he has moved the man a little, if he answers besides the purpose, he does not know how to treat him. But he then either abuses or ridicules him and says, he is an illiterate man. It is not possible to do anything with him. Now a guide, when he has found a man out of the road, leads him into the right way. He does not ridicule or abuse him and then leave him. Do you also show the illiterate man the truth? And you will see that he follows. But so long as you do not show him the truth, do not ridicule him, but rather feel your own incapacity. Now this was the first and chief peculiarity of Socrates, never to be irritated in argument, never to utter anything abusive, anything insulting, but to bear with abusive persons and put an end to the quarrel. If you would know what great power he had in this way, read the Symposium of Xenophon, and you will see how many quarrels he put an end to. Hence, with good reason in the poets, also this power is most highly praised. Quickly with skill, he settles great disputes. Hesiod Theogony. On anxiety. When I see a man anxious, I say, what does this man want? If he did not want something which is not in his power, how could he be anxious? For this reason, a lute player, when he is singing by himself, has no anxiety. But when he enters the theatre, he is anxious, even if he has a good voice, and plays well on the lute. For he not only wishes to sing well, but also to obtain applause. But this is not in his power. Accordingly, where he has skill, there he has confidence. Bring any single person who knows nothing of music, and the musician does not care for him. But in that matter where a man knows nothing, and has not been practised, there he is anxious. What matter is this? He knows not what a crowd is, or what the praise of a crowd is. However, he has learned to strike the lowest chord and the highest, but what the praise of the many is, and what power it has in life, he neither knows nor has he thought about it. Hence he must of necessity tremble and grow pale. Is any man then afraid about things which are not evils? No. Is he afraid about things which are evils, but still so far within his power that they may not happen? Certainly he is not. If then the things which are independent of the will are neither good nor bad, and all things which do depend on the will are within our power, and no man can either take them from us or give them to us. If we do not choose, where is room left for anxiety? But we are anxious about our poor body, our little property, about the will of Caesar, but not anxious about things internal. Are we anxious about not forming a false opinion? No, for this is in my power. About not exerting our movements contrary to nature? No, not even about this. When then you see a man pale, as the physician says, judging from the complexion, this man's spleen is disordered, and that man's liver. So also say, this man's desire and aversions are disordered. He is not in the right way. He is in a fever. For nothing else changes the color, or causes trembling or chattering of the teeth, or causes a man to sink in his knees and shift from foot to foot. Iliad. For this reason, when Zeno was going to meet Antigonus, he was not anxious, for Antigonus had no power over any of the things which Zeno admired, and Zeno did not care for those things of which Antigonus had power. But Antigonus was anxious when he was going to meet Zeno, for he wished to please Zeno, but this was a thing external. But Zeno did not want to please Antigonus, for no man who is skilled in any art wishes to please one who has no such skill. Should I try to please you? Why? I suppose you know the measure by which one man is estimated by another. Have you taken pains to learn what is a good man and what is a bad man, and how a man becomes one or the other? Why then are you not good yourself? How, he replies, am I not good? Because no good man laments or groans or weeps. No good man is pale and trembles, or says, how will he receive me? How will he listen to me? Slave, just as it pleases him. Why do you care about what belongs to others? Is it now his fault if he receives badly what proceeds from you? Certainly. And is it possible that a fault should be one man's and evil in another? No. Why then are you anxious about that which belongs to others? Your question is reasonable, but I am anxious how I shall speak to him. Cannot you then speak to him as you choose? But I fear that I may be disconcerted. If you are going to write the name of Dion, are you afraid that you would be disconcerted? By no means. Why? Is it not because you have practiced writing the name? Certainly. Well, if you are going to read the name, would you not feel the same? And why? Because every art has a certain strength and confidence in the things which belong to it. Have you then not practiced speaking? And what else did you learn in the school? Syllogisms and sophistical propositions? For what purpose? Was it not for the purpose of discoursing skillfully? And is not discoursing skillfully the same as discoursing seasonably and cautiously and with intelligence, and also without making mistakes and without hindrance? Besides all this with confidence. Yes. When then you are mounted on a horse and go into a plain, are you anxious at being matched against a man who is on foot, and anxious in a matter in which you are practiced, and he is not? Yes, but that person has power to kill me. Speak the truth, then, unhappy man, and do not brag, nor claim to be a philosopher, nor refuse to acknowledge your masters. But so long as you present this handle in your body, follow every man who is stronger than yourself. Socrates used to practice speaking, he who talked as he did to the tyrants, to the dicasts, he who talked in his prison. Diogenes has practiced speaking, he who spoke as he did to Alexander, to the pirates, to the person who bought him. These men were confident in the things which they practiced. But do you walk off to your own affairs and never leave them, and go and sit in a corner and weave syllogisms and propose them to another? There is not in you the man who can rule a state. Tenazo. When a certain Roman entered with his son and listened to one reading, Epictetus said, "This is the method of instruction," and he stopped. When the Roman asked him to go on, Epictetus said, "Every art, when it is taught, causes labor to him who is unacquainted with it, and is unskilled in it. And indeed, the things which proceed from the arts immediately show their use and the purpose for which they were made, and most of them contain something attractive and pleasing. For indeed, to be present and to observe how a shoemaker learns is not a pleasant thing, but the shoe is useful, and also not disagreeable to look at it. And the discipline of a smith when he is learning is very disagreeable to one who chances to be present and is a stranger to the art. But the work shows the use of the art, but you will see this much more in music. For if you are present while a person is learning, the discipline will appear most disagreeable, yet the results of music are pleasing and delightful to those who know nothing of music. And here we conceive the work of a philosopher to be something of this kind. He must adapt his wish to what is going on, so that neither any of the things which are taking place shall take place contrary to our wish, nor any of the things which do not take place shall not take place when we wish that they should. From this, the result is to those who have so arranged their work of philosophy, not to fail in the desire, nor to fall in with that which they would avoid, without uneasiness, without fear, without perturbation, to pass through life themselves, together with their associates, maintaining the relations both natural and acquired, as the relation of son, of father, of brother, of citizen, of man, of wife, of neighbor, of fellow traveler, of ruler, of ruled. The work of a philosopher we conceive to be something like this. It remains next to inquire how this must be accomplished. We see then that the carpenter, when he has learned certain things, becomes a carpenter. The pilot, by learning certain things, becomes a pilot. May it not then in philosophy also not be sufficient to wish to be wise and good, and that there is also necessity to learn certain things? We inquire then what these things are. The philosophers say that we ought first to learn that there is a God, and that he provides for all things. Also that it is not possible to conceal from him our acts, and even our intentions and thoughts. The next thing is to learn what is the nature of the gods, for such as they are discovered to be, he, who would please and obey them, must try with all his power to be like them. If the divine is faithful, man also must be faithful. If it is free, man also must be free. If beneficent, man also must be beneficent. If magnanimous, man must also be magnanimous. As being, then, an imitator of God, he must do and say everything consistently with this fact. To or against those who obstinately persist in what they have determined. When some persons have heard these words, that a man ought to be constant, and that the will is naturally free and not subject to compulsion, but that all other things are subject to hindrance, to slavery, and are in the power of others, they suppose that they ought without deviation to abide by everything which they have determined. But in the first place, that which has been determined ought to be sound. I require tone in the body, but such as exists in a healthy body, in an athletic body. But if it is plain to me that you have the tone of a frenzied man, and you boast of it, I shall say to you, man, seek the physician. This is not tone, but atony. In a different way, something of the same kind is felt by those who listen to these discourses in a wrong manner, which was the case with one of my companions, who for no reason resolved to starve himself to death. I heard of it when it was the third day of his abstinence from food, and I went to inquire what had happened. I have resolved, he said, but still tell me what it was which induced you to resolve, for if you resolve rightly, we shall sit with you and assist you to depart. But if you have made an unreasonable resolution, change your mind. We ought to keep our determinations. What are you doing, man? We ought to keep not to all our determinations, but to those which are right. For if you are now persuaded that it is right, do not change your mind. If you think fit, but persist and say, we ought to abide by our determinations. Will you not make the beginning and lay the foundation in an inquiry whether the determination is sound or not sound, and so then build on it firmness and security? But if you lay a rotten and ruinous foundation, will not your miserable little building fall down the sooner, the more and the stronger are the materials which you shall lay on it? Without any reason would you withdraw from us out of life a man who is a friend and a companion, a citizen of the same city, both the great and the small city? Then while you are committing murder and destroying a man who has done no wrong, do you say that you ought to abide by your determinations? And if it ever in any way came into your head to kill me, ought you to abide by your determination? Now this man was with difficulty persuaded to change his mind, but it is impossible to convince some persons at present, so that I seem now to know what I did not know before, the meaning of the common saying, that you can neither persuade nor break a fool. It may never be my lot to have a wise fool for my friend. Nothing is more intractable. I am determined, the man says. Madmen are also, but the more firmly they form a judgment on things which do not exist, the more hellebore they require. Will you not act like a sick man and call on the physician? I am sick, master, help me. Consider what I must do. It is my duty to obey you, so it is here also. I know not what I ought to do, but I am come to learn. Not so, but speak to me about other things. Upon this I have determined. What other things? For what is greater and more useful than for you to be persuaded that it is not sufficient to have made your determination and not to change it? This is the tone of madness, not of health. I will die if you compel me to this. Why, man, what has happened? I have determined. I have had a lucky escape, that you have not determined to kill me. I take no money. Why? I have determined. Be assured that with the very tone which you now use and recite refusing to take, there is nothing to hinder you at some time from inclining without reason to take money, and then saying, I have determined. As in a distempered body subject to deflections, the humor inclines sometimes to these parts, and then to those. So too a sickly soul knows not which way to incline. But if to this inclination and movement there is added a tone, then the evil becomes past help and cure. That we do not strive to use our opinions about good and evil. Where is the good in the will? Where is the evil in the will? Where is neither of them? In those things which are independent of the will. Well then, does anyone among us think of these lessons out of the schools? Does anyone meditate by himself to give an answer to things as in the case of questions? Is it day? Yes. Is it night? No. Well, is the number of stars easy? I cannot say. When money is shown to you, have you studied to make the proper answer, that money is not a good thing? Have you practiced yourself on these answers, or only against sophisms? Why do you wonder then if in the cases which you have studied, in those you have improved, but in those which you have not studied, in those you remain the same? When the rhetorician knows that he has written well, that he has committed to memory what he has written, and brings an agreeable voice, why is he still anxious? Because he is not satisfied with having studied. What then does he want? To be praised by the audience? For the purpose then of being able to practice declamation, he has been disciplined, but with respect to praise and blame, he has not been disciplined. For when did he hear from anyone what praise is, what blame is, what the nature of each is, what kind of praise should be sought, or what kind of blame should be shunned? And when did he practice this discipline which follows these words? Why then do you still wonder, if in the matters which a man has learned that he surpasses others, and in those which he has not been disciplined, there he is the same with the many? So the lute player knows to play well, sings well, and has a fine dress, yet he trembles when he enters on the stage. For these matters he understands, but he does not know what a crowd is, nor the shouts of a crowd, nor what ridicule is. Neither does he know what anxiety is, whether it is our work or the work of another, whether it is possible to stop it or not. For this reason, if he has been praised, he leaves the theatre puffed up, but if he has been ridiculed, the swollen bladder has been punctured and subsides. This is the case also with ourselves. What do we admire? Externals. About what things are we busy? Externals. And have we any doubt then why we fear or why we are anxious? What then happens when we think the things which are coming on us to be evils? It is not in our power not to be afraid. It is not in our power not to be anxious. Then we say, Lord God, how shall I not be anxious? Fool, have you not hands? Did not God make them for you? Sit down now and pray that your nose may not run. Wipe yourself rather, and do not blame him. Well then, has he given to you nothing in the present case? Has he not given to you endurance? Has he not given to you magnanimity? Has he not given you to manliness? When you have such hands, do you still look for one whom shall wipe your nose? But we neither study these things nor care for them. Give me a man who cares how he shall do anything, not for the obtaining of a thing, but who cares about his own energy. What man, when he is walking about, cares for his own energy? Who, when he is deliberating, cares about his own deliberation, and not about obtaining that about which he deliberates? And if he succeeds, he is elated and says, How well we have deliberated! Did I not tell you, brother, that it is impossible, when we have thought about anything, that it should not turn out thus? But if the thing should turn out otherwise, the wretched man is humbled. He knows not even what to say about what has taken place. Who among us, for the sake of this matter, has consulted a seer? Who among us, as to his actions, has not slept in indifference? Who? Give to me one that I may see the man whom I have long been looking for, who is truly noble and ingenious, whether young or old. Name him. What then are the things which are heavy on us and disturb us? What else than opinions? What else than opinions lies heavy upon him who goes away and leaves his companions and friends and places and habits of life? Now little children, for instance, when they cry on the nurse leaving them for a short time, forget their sorrow if they receive a small cake. Do you choose then that we should compare you to little children? No, by Zeus, for I do not wish to be pacified by a small cake, but by right opinions. And what are these? Such as a man ought to study all day and not be affected by anything that is not his own, neither by companion or place nor gymnasia, not even by his own body. But to remember the law and to have it before his eyes. And what is the divine law? To keep a man's own, not to claim that which belongs to others, but to use what is given. And when it is not given, not to desire it. And when a thing is taken away, to give it up readily and immediately. And be thankful for the time that a man has had the use of it. If you do not cry for your nurse and mamma. For what matter does it make by what thing a man is subdued? On what he depends. In what respect are you better than he who cries for a girl? If you grieve for a little gymnasium and little porticos and young men and such places of amusement. Another comes and laments that he should no longer drink the water of Dirce. Is the Martian water worse than that of Dirce? But I was used to the water of Dirce, and you in turn will be used to the other. Then if you become like attached to this also, cry for this too, and try to make a verse like this, the verse of Euripides, the hot baths of Nero and the Martian water. See how tragedy is made when common things happen to silly men. When then shall I see Athens again and Acropolis? Wretch, are you not content with what you see daily? Have you anything better or greater to see than the sun, the moon, and the stars, the whole earth, the sea? But if indeed you comprehend him who administers the whole, and carry him about in yourself, do you still desire small stones and a beautiful rock? How we must adapt preconceptions to particular cases. What is the first business of him who philosophizes? To throw away self-conceit. For it is impossible for a man to begin to learn that which he thinks he knows. As to things then which ought to be done and not to be done, and good and bad, and beautiful and ugly, all of us talking of them are at random go to the philosophers. And on these matters we praise, we censure, we accuse, we blame, we judge, and determine about principles honorable and dishonorable. But why do we go to the philosophers? Because we wish to learn what we do not think that we know. And what is this? Theorems. For we wish to learn what philosophers say as being something elegant and acute, and some wish to learn that they may get profit from what they learn. It is ridiculous then to think that a person wishes to learn one thing, and will learn another, or further, that a man will make proficiency in that which he does not learn. But the many are deceived by this, which deceived also the rhetorician Theopompus, when he blames even Plato for wishing everything to be defined. For what does he say? Did none of us before you use words good and just, or did we utter the sounds in an unmeaning and empty way, without understanding what they severely signify? Now who tells you, Theopompus, that we had not natural notions of each of these things and preconceptions? But it is not possible to adapt preconceptions to their correspondent objects if we have not distinguished them, and inquired what object must be subjected to each preconception. You may make the same charge against physicians also. For who among us did not use the words healthy and healthy before Hippocrates lived? Or did we utter these words as empty sounds? For we have also a certain preconception of health, but we are not able to adapt it. For this reason one says, abstain from food, another says, give food, another says, bleed, another says, use cupping. What is the reason? Is it any other than that a man cannot properly adapt the preconceptions of health to particulars? How we should struggle against appearances. Every habit and faculty is maintained and increased by the corresponding actions. The habit of walking, by walking. The habit of running, by running. If you would be a good reader, read. If a writer, write. But when you shall not have read for 30 days in succession, but have done something else, you will know the consequence. In the same way, if you shall have lain down 10 days, get up and attempt to make a long walk. You will see how your legs are weakened. Generally, then, if you would make anything a habit, do it. If you would not make it a habit, do not do it, but accustom yourself to do something else in place of it. So it is with respect to the affection of the soul. When you have been angry, you must know that not only has this evil befallen you, but that you have also increased the habit, and in a manner thrown fuel upon the fire. In this manner, certainly, as philosophers say, also diseases of the mind grow up. For when you have once desired money, if reason be applied to lead to a perception of the evil, the desire is stopped, and the ruling faculty of our mind is restored to the original authority. But if you apply no means of cure, it no longer returns to the same state. But being again excited by the corresponding appearance, it is inflamed to desire quicker than before. And when this takes place continually, it is henceforth hardened, and the disease of the mind confirms the love of money. For he who has had a fever, and has been relieved from it, is not in the same state that he was before, unless he has been completely cured. Something of the kind also happens in diseases of the soul. Certain traces and blisters are left in it, And unless a man shall completely efface them, when he is again lashed on the same places, the lash will not produce blisters, but sores. If, then, you wish not to be of an angry temper, do not feed the habit. Throw nothing on it which will increase it. At first keep quiet, and count the days on which you have not been angry. I used to be impassioned every day, now every second day, then every third, then every fourth. But if you intermitted 30 days, make a sacrifice to God. For the habit at first begins to be weakened, and then is completely destroyed. I have not been vexed today, nor the day after, nor yet on any succeeding day during 2 or 3 months. But I took care when some exciting things happened. Be assured that you are in a good way. How then shall this be done? Be willing at length to be approved by yourself. Be willing to appear beautiful to God. Desire to be in purity with your own pure self and with God. Then when any such appearance visits you, Plato says, have recourse to expiations. Go suppliant to the temples of the averting deities. It is even sufficient if you resort to the society of noble and just men and compare yourself with them, whether you find one who is living or dead. But in the first place, be not hurried away by the rapidity of appearance, but say, appearances, wait for me a little. Let me see who you are and what you are about. Let me put you to the test. Do not allow the appearance to lead you on and draw lively pictures of the things which will follow. For if you do, it will carry you off wherever it pleases, but rather bring in to oppose it some other beautiful and noble appearance, and cast out this base appearance. And if you are accustomed to be exercised in this way, you will see what shoulders, what sinews, what strength you have. But now it is only trifling words and nothing more. This is the true athlete, and who exercises himself against such appearances. Stay, wretch, do not be carried away. Great is the combat, divine is the work. It is for kingship, for freedom, and for happiness, for freedom from perturbation. Remember God, call on him as a helper and protector. As men at sea call on the Dioscuri in a storm. For what is a greater storm than that which comes from appearances, which are violent and drive away the reason? For the storm itself, what else is it but an appearance? For take away the fear of death, and suppose as many thunders and lightnings as you please, and you will know what calm and serenity there is in the ruling faculty. But if you once been defeated and say that you will conquer hereafter, and then say on the same again, be assured that you will at least be in so wretched a condition, so weak, that you will not even know afterwards that you are doing wrong, but you will even begin to make apologies for your wrongdoing, and then you will confirm the saying of Hesiod to be true. With constant ills, the dilatory strives. Of inconsistency. Some things men readily confess, and other things they do not. No one then will confess that he is a fool or without understanding, but quite the contrary. You will hear all men saying, I wish I had fortune equal to my understanding. But men readily confess that they are timid, and they say, I am rather timid, I confess. But as to other respects, you will not find me to be foolish. A man will not readily confess that he is intemperate, that he is unjust. He will not confess at all. He will by no means confess that he is envious or a busybody. Most men will confess that they are compassionate. What then is the reason? Chief thing is inconsistency and confusion in the things which relate to good and evil. But different men have different reasons, and generally what they imagine to be base, they do not confess at all. But they suppose timidity to be a characteristic of a good disposition, and compassion also, but silliness to be the absolute characteristics of a slave. And they do not at all admit the things which are offenses against society. But in the case of most errors, for this reason chiefly they are induced to confess them, because they imagine that there is something involuntary in them, as in timidity and compassion. And if a man confess that he is in any respect intemperate, he alleges love as an excuse for what is involuntary. But men do not imagine injustice to be at all involuntary. There is also in jealousy, as they suppose, something involuntary, and for this reason they confess to jealousy also. Living then among such men who are so confused, so ignorant of what they say, and of the evils which they have or have not, and why they have them, or how they shall be relieved of them, I think it is worth the trouble for a man to watch constantly, whether I also am one of them, what imagination I have about myself, how I conduct myself, whether I conduct myself as a prudent man, whether I conduct myself as a temperate man, whether I ever say this, that I have been taught to be prepared for everything that may happen. Have I the consciousness which a man who knows nothing ought to have, that I know nothing? Do I go to my teacher as men go to oracles, prepared to obey? Or do I, like a sniveling boy, go to my school to learn history and understand the books which I did not understand before? And if it should happen so, to explain them also to others. Man, you have had a fight in the house with a poor slave. You have turned the family upside down. You have frightened the neighbors. and you come to me as if you were a wise man, and you take your seat and judge how I have explained some word, and how I have babbled whatever came into my head. You come full of envy and humbled, because you bring nothing from home, and you sit during the discussion thinking of nothing else than how your father is disposed towards you and your brother. What are they saying about me there? Now they think that I am improving, and are saying, he will return with all knowledge. I wish I could learn everything before I return, but much labor is necessary, and no one sends me anything, and the baths at Nicopolis are dirty. Everything is bad at home and bad here. On friendship. Would a man apply himself too earnestly that he naturally loves? Do men then apply themselves earnestly to the things which are bad? By no means. Well, do they apply themselves to things which in no way concern themselves? Not to these either. It remains then that they employ themselves earnestly only about things which are good. And if they are earnestly employed about things they love, such things also. Whoever then understands what is good could also know how to love, but he cannot distinguish good from bad, and things which are neither good nor bad from both. How can he possess the power of loving? To love, then, is only the power in the wise. For universally, be not deceived, every animal is attached to nothing so much as to its own interests. Whatever then appears to it an impediment to this interest, whether this be a brother, or a father, or a child, or beloved, or lover, it hates, spurns, curses. For its nature is to love nothing so much as its own interests. This is father, brother, and kinsman, and country, and God. When then the gods appear to us to be an impediment to this, we abuse them and throw down their statues and burn their temples, as Alexander ordered the temples of Asclepius to be burned when his dear friend died. For this reason, if a man put in the same place his interest, sanctity, goodness, and country, and parents, and friends, all these are secured. But if he puts in one place his interest, another his friends, and his country, and his kinsmen, and justice itself, all these give way, being borne down by the weight of interest. For where the eye and the mind are placed, to that place of necessity the animal inclines. If in the flesh, there is the ruling power; if in the will, it is there; and if it is in externals, it is in there. If then I am there where my will is, then only shall I be a friend of such as I ought to be, and son and father, for this will be my interest, to maintain the character of fidelity, of modesty, of patience, of abstinence, of active cooperation, of observing my relations. But if I put myself in one place and honesty in another, then the doctrine of Epicurus becomes strong, which asserts either that there is no honesty, or it is that which opinion holds to be honest. It was through this ignorance that the Athenians and the Lacedaemonians quarreled, and the Thebans with both, and the great king quarreled with Hellas, and the Macedonians with both, and the Romans with the Getae. And still earlier the Trojan War happened for these reasons. Alexander was the guest of Menelaus, and if any man had seen their friendly disposition, he would not have believed anyone who said that they were not friends. But there was a cast between them, a bit of meat, a handsome woman, and about her war rose. Now when you see brothers to be friends, appearing to have one mind, you do not conclude from this anything but their friendship, not even if they swear it and say that it is impossible for them to be separated from one another. For the ruling principle of a bad man cannot be trusted. It is insecure, has no certain rule by which it is directed, and is overpowered at different times by different appearances. But examine not what other men examine, if they are born of the same parents and brought up together, and under the same pedagogue, but examine this only, wherein they place their interest, whether in externals or in the will. If in externals, do not name them friends, no more than name them trustworthy or constant, or brave or free. Do not name them even men, if you have any judgment. For that is not a principle of human nature, which makes them bite one another, and abuse one another, and occupy deserted places or public places, as if they were mountains, and in the courts of justice display the acts of robbers, nor yet that which makes them intemperate and adulterers and corrupters, nor that which makes them do whatever else men do against one another, through this one opinion only, that of placing themselves and their interest in the things which are not within the power of the will. But if you hear that in truth these men think the good to be only there, where will is, and where there is a right use of appearances, no longer trouble yourself whether they are father or son or brothers, or have associated a long time and are companions. But when you have ascertained this only, confidently declare that they are friends, as you declare that they are faithful, that they are just. For where else is friendship than where there is fidelity and modesty, where there is a communion of honest things and of nothing else? But you may say, such a one treated me with regard so long, and did he not love me? How do you know, slave, if he did not regard you in the same way as he wipes his shoes with a sponge, or as he takes care of his breast? Beast, how do you know, when you have ceased to be useful as a vessel, he will not throw you away like a broken platter? But this woman is my wife, and we have lived together so long, And how long did Euryphile live with Amariphis, and was the mother of children of many? But a necklace came between them. And what is a necklace? It is the opinion about such things. That was the bestial principle. That was the thing which broke asunder the friendship between husband and wife, that which did not allow the man to be a wife, nor the mother to be a mother. And let every man among you who is seriously resolved either be a friend himself, or to have another for his friend, cut out these opinions, hate them, drive them from his soul. Thus, first of all, he will not reproach himself, he will not be at variance with himself, he will not change his mind, he will not torture himself. In the next place, to another also, who is like himself, he will be altogether and completely a friend. But he will bear with the man who is unlike himself. He will be kind to him, gentle, ready to pardon on account of his ignorance, on account of his being mistaken in things of the greatest importance. But he will be harsh to no man, being well convinced of Plato's doctrine that every mind is deprived of truth unwillingly. If you cannot do this, yet you can do in all other respects as friends do, drink together, and lodge together, and sail together. And you may be born of the same parents, for snakes also are, but neither will they be friends, nor you, so long as you retain these bestial and cursed opinions.